esteemed panelists who I'll introduce now. First, Sanjay Uppal, who is CEO and founder of VeloCloud. Dr. Mohit Aron, who is founder and CEO of Cohesity. And Bharat Ranjan, who is Senior Director of Data Center and Network Engineering from ServiceNow. So with that, we will dive into what we're seeing collectively in this area of software-defined infrastructure outside the data center. So Sanjay, let's start with a story of VeloCloud. You provide remote software-defined WAN, and WAN is one of the remote office use case is maybe a classic place to think of when automating something, doing software-defined outside the data center. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you approach solving these infrastructure needs, and what other use cases you're excited about right now?
Sure, absolutely. Can you folks hear me at the back? Okay. So what VeloCloud does is we do software-defined WAN, where WAN stands for wide area networking. And as Guido was saying, this is the phase of moving IT to the cloud. And our particular IT that we're moving to the cloud is networking IT. Now, you can't really move what's inside the data center to the cloud. You can move the whole data center itself. You can't move your local area network because you need the routers and the switches as well as the access points. But what connects the two together, which is the wide area network, that is what we are moving to the cloud. And the other thing that Guido said, which is very applicable to us, is that what previously is on the premise as a physical appliance, the physical becomes virtual and the product becomes a service. So the physical product becomes a virtual service. And that's really what we're doing in the networking space. So what's going on in this space is very exciting. Usually networking is pretty boring because infrastructure doesn't change very often. But we're very fortunate that at this time networking is changing because of this advent of virtual services. So what Gartner predicts is by the end of this year, about 1% of enterprises will be doing software-defined WAN. But in the next 3 years, that 1% is going to go to 30%. So that's tremendous growth. And we're seeing it ourselves. The company was formed just over 4 years ago, and from a clean sheet of paper. We're very fortunate that we have about 600 revenue-paying customers today, including the likes of AT&T, Verizon, not Verizon, AT&T, I shouldn't say Verizon, but AT&T, Sprint, and the like, and some other service providers who are very close by over here. And one, just to give you a simple example, DevCon, the guys who constructed the Levi's Stadium not too far away. So previously, they would deploy a lot of their infrastructure on the premise itself. But with software-defined WAN, a lot of that can be moved to the cloud. The advantage that they get from that is now they can run their network from anywhere. They know what's being accessed from every one of their construction sites. If they have to put a new construction site up, it doesn't require a wired connection to come in. So all of this becomes really virtualized. Now, last point I want to make is that this could actually reach the consumer as well. A lot of you folks at home, I know it was for me, that you become the IT person in the home. Dad, my internet is not working, or I can't see Netflix, or the VPN is down. So what software-defined WAN can enable you to do is instead of doubling down on your single connection, like Comcast will come around and say, instead of 50 megabits, pay us another $50 and you can get 100 megabits. Instead of doing that, one of the things that software-defined WAN will be able to do is to abstract out the transport, meaning that instead of just doubling down on cable, you can get a cable and a DSL, or a cable or an LTE, and you can mix and match them together, and you don't have to worry about where the packets are going. All you need to do is, I want to watch Netflix, I want my VPN to be up, and the internet should work fine. So this is kind of one example where at some point, SD-WAN will also reach the consumer, but for right now, it's actually very exciting times within the enterprise. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, David.
Yeah. Just as a follow-up for that. Let's try this. Just as a follow-up for that, Guido mentioned some of the challenges from a skill perspective enterprises face in adopting some of the cloud technologies. Did you face similar types of skill challenges as you're bringing SD-WAN into the corporation? Are there WAN huggers the way there were server huggers that kind of don't want to give up their workloads to the cloud?
Yeah, the thing is that we are always about a phase behind where the cloud adoption is. So when workloads move to the cloud, then we believe that the networking moves along with it. Now, in terms of skill, it's always a case in Silicon Valley, as you know, that it's very difficult to find really smart people. But one thing that works in our favor is that we are a 100% indirect or channel-driven company. So we rely on the likes of the AT&Ts of the world and the Megapats and the Vonages and the Metels and the Mitels to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So we try to keep the company as small as is feasible and yet get the software defined and written, but everything else we try to outsource to other folks.
So Mohit, let's turn to the data side of the equation. So networking outside the data center, and now the data with the applications and their related data also leaving the data center, going to the cloud, going into different types of IoT applications. It creates a different challenge. And I think this is where Cohesity is really playing, right, to try and bring this data together. Can you speak a little bit about how Cohesity is pulling together data and dealing with the proliferation of data outside the data center and helping affirmative advantage? Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, at Cohesity, our philosophy is that your on-prem data center is kind of like owning a house. And the cloud, the public cloud, is like renting a hotel or renting a storage box. And when your house is messy, all of us would like to run to a hotel, right? And we find the house indeed to be very messy with all the legacy infrastructure in the data center. There are plenty of silos. Cohesity is a company that aims to disrupt the world of secondary storage, backups, file shares, analytics, test and dev, all the stuff that's kind of not mission critical. Everything that you buy in this realm is siloed. You buy it from a different vendor. You juggle, multiple licensees. You deal with multiple UIs. So that makes your house very messy. And is it a big surprise that when your house is messy, you want to run to a hotel, which is the public cloud? So our goal, I was the ex-CTO and founder of Nutanix, where I pioneered the concept of hyperconvergence along with the rest of my team. So our philosophy is to bring the concept of hyperconvergence applied to the secondary storage space, kind of build one infrastructure on which you can run multiple things like backups, test and development, analytics, and so on and so forth. So you kind of clean up the house a little bit and simplify it. But we also believe that the hotels, that is the public cloud, the world is a great place because of both houses and hotels. So what we want to provide to customers is a happy medium, kind of provide the best of both worlds. So what Cohesity is building is, in essence, a software-defined solution to connect the private data center with the public cloud, and thereby tremendously simplified secondary storage, provide a hybrid cloud that allows our customers to move workloads back and forth, use the cloud for what it's good for, which is flexibility and maybe long-term data retention for archival purposes, and use on-prem stuff, simplify it for what that's good for. It gives you more control. You get to choose what you want. You get more value for the money that you spend. So in essence, we are all about a hybrid cloud, and we apply that to secondary storage. That's what Cohesity is about, and that's our philosophy. Let's bring the best of both worlds to our customers.
So which use cases are you finding the first places people want to start with your solution, with secondary?
Yeah, fantastic question.
Yeah.
So of course, the vision is to consolidate the whole of secondary storage and connect the private and public clouds. But we found the low-hanging fruit to be the realm of backups within your private data center. Backups is a very boring, unsexy technology that has not been innovated upon in the last 10 years. We find people buy backup software from one vendor, a piece of storage on which to put the backups from another vendor, a piece of hardware on which to run the backup software from another vendor. So even within backups, we have plenty of fragmentation and all these silos. And actually, the company was formed on the observation, why are backups nothing more than an insurance policy today? People use their backups for nothing more than to get peace of mind. So by actually consolidating all of that on one infrastructure and also doing more on that infrastructure, like test and dev, like analytics, and so on and so forth, and connecting the public cloud, that's where we start. So we start by simplifying backups, just plain old backups. Bring tremendous simplicity to that, bring a scale-out infrastructure, software-defined, the ability to kind of just go to one vendor and you get everything, and then we expand from there.
Great. Okay. So Bharat, let's move to you, and let's say you bring a different perspective, a little bit different perspective from the rest of us, in that you're both maybe a user of the technologies and also working for ServiceNow, a vendor to people using the similar technologies. So can you talk a little bit about what does all this mean from a management perspective for the enterprise that has to, like Guido was saying, be accountable for the results to the business, but maybe not having control over that. Can you talk about the implications of that for us?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? It's never, we live in an interesting time. It's never been faster, never been faster or easier for us to build and deliver something. And a lot of that has to do with the entire build cycle, right? It's being completely radically changed. And as on the infrastructure side, an example of that is, even as recent as 5 years ago, to go build something before you even started developing, you go talk to the IT guys, you go talk to the network guys, you go talk to the data center guys, storage, systems, all just to get enough infrastructure to start building your product. Today, armed with a credit card, sitting in my bedroom on a sunny Sunday afternoon, I can stand up a data center almost anywhere in the world in a matter of hours. That is amazing pace of change from where we were 5 years ago. On the development side, once you decide how you're going to build your product, solution, app, whatever it is, you have a lot of pieces that make up that solution. Today, a lot of those pieces are probably delivered by somebody who's innovating that piece on the cloud. Example is a company called Twilio. You have voice and messaging apps being offered to you as a service on the cloud that you can consume within minutes, whereas in the past you would have spent hours, days, or months developing that piece, which may or may not be core to your product. It's actually conceivable today for you to build your entire product without developing any of that in-house. You can take services offered on the internet using, again, a credit card. You piece together yourself to deliver the product without doing any development. That brings, that's a first challenge. What do you give away versus what do you develop yourself? Once you cross that, and as Guido mentioned, the next big challenge is you are now relying on someone else's product to run your own. So availability becomes paramount. Security and performance as well, but more than anything else, availability. When somebody picks up your product or picks up their phone or computer to use your product, if it is not available, if it's not there, it doesn't matter how great it is. So now, all of a sudden, you're taking dependency on someone else to keep your product up and running. That brings one more challenge, which is what happens when that service goes down. As we all know, every cloud has a rainy day. So when that service goes down, is it not that critical? You can live with an outage of another service for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 days, whatever it happens to be, or not. You can't live without it. So now what do? Do you build a backup in-house, or do you go to yet another cloud as a backup to your primary cloud? Which probably brings us to our third and probably the hardest challenge enterprises are going to face, which is how do you change an organization, how do you change a mindset that is built on design, build, test, iterate, deliver, where you own all of it in-house, to now pivot that organization to coordinate, orchestrate, monitor, and manage somebody else's cloud. And as Guido said very eloquently, you now are running a service that's built on something you didn't build, but yet you're 100% responsible for it. And that's perhaps the biggest challenge of how you evolve your org. So the three biggest challenges I see are, what do you give away? The stuff you give away, how do you keep it available, secure, and performing to your standards? And three, how do you pivot your org or parts of your org to now go to this orchestration world versus build and design?
And so I'll follow that up with a question. Maybe all three of you can chime in if you have a point of view on it. Is what's your experience of the enterprise and their readiness and the skill that's required to make that pivot that you just described and manage these new types of services, whether it's kind of the end-to-end version that you just described or your individual offerings? Yeah.
I can speak a little bit of this because ServiceNow does some of this. We design the tools and sort of the orchestration things that allow people to do this. But from what the people, what we've seen internally and the people we've talked to, the biggest challenge is you now have somebody who used to develop, who used to create. You're now asking them to go pivot to manage somebody else's creation, and that's a hard mindset jump to make for some people.
Yeah, hello. There
you go.
I believe that even though we are building very sophisticated pieces of infrastructure, it should be presented to our customers in almost an Apple-like simplicity. So it should be a very non-disruptive change for them. They should just continue doing what they were doing, and things just magically become simple. When they were dealing with tens or hundreds of different management platforms, now they just deal with one. It's all click button. Again, it's Apple-like simplicity. So we find that our approach has been very easy to uptake by the customers that we have, and we want to continue to subscribe to that philosophy. So make it very, very easy for our customers to use not just on-prem, secondary storage, but also kind of burst to the cloud and use the cloud in the ways that it's good for.
So there's a sticker on the refrigerator in our kitchen, and the sticker says, "There is no cloud really, it's just somebody else's computer." And that's actually very true, because when we look at the cloud, and for people who have the network huggers and stuff, there's an incredible willingness to give that up and to outsource that, because now businesses are really focusing on outcome rather than on ownership. And we are finding that in the networking space. So that's why we believe that the services model, whether it's a traditional service provider or it's a new managed services provider, this move afoot is on. And enterprises, I've not seen this, at least in my career, the incredible willingness to outsource these kinds of services that, as he was saying, are not really key to running the business. So like a Brooks Brothers doesn't really want to worry about exactly how MPLS works, or La Quinta, or any one of these folks who are all customers of ours. They'd much rather focus on their core business.
So certainly from the case of IBM, we see adoption of these technologies kind of vary by industry, by geography, and there are some real differences in how people are consuming them. I'm just curious, would you like to comment about how, who do you think the early adopters are in your respective niches, and kind of what are the characteristics of those? Are they the big enterprises, the born on the clouds, and is there any particular either regional or industry concentrations that you're seeing for adoption? Yeah.
I'll take that. In the industry that we operate in, the early adopters are all the enterprises that have lots and lots of data. Yeah. And like I described, we are all about cleaning up the house and helping people also to get the best of both worlds, houses and hotels. And the big enterprises are the ones that have a very messy house. They've been buying for 2 decades stuff from legacy vendors, and they have a lot of mess. So you show them the light at the end of the tunnel, you provide a way to simplify that mess, they jump to it. And hey, they're also interested in, how can they leverage the cloud? They're also interested in how can they leverage all the goodness that public cloud provides to them. So you give them an easy path to that, along with cleaning up the house they have, they jump at it. And so 70 to 80% of our customers tend to be of the enterprise kind, the guys who have lots and lots of data.
And that's very similar to what we see as well. A lot of our large enterprise customers have 200, 300 legacy apps which they cannot overnight change to a cloud service. So what they want is some sort of system, some mechanism or orchestration that allows them to say, I'm going to pick 20 of these and move them to a cloud service right now, but the remaining 180, I need time. So what kind of system, what kind of unifying platform can I build on that allows me to migrate at my pace and what I'm comfortable with? Orchestration migration is as much of a key as actually going to the cloud service itself.
Yeah, for us, our early adopters are any company that has a large number of locations, because we're taking infrastructure out of those locations. So, the two that I mentioned, like Brooks Brothers, La Quinta, which is this hotel chain, O'Reilly Auto Stores, if you drive by and buy, oil change equipment, O'Reilly, you'll probably bump into them. So any place that has more than, I'd say, 50 locations, that's an early adopter. But of course, anything outside of Silicon Valley, if you say cloud, they don't really mean what we mean by cloud. The first thing that they would do is look up. So you gotta, modulate and find where the early adopters are without using, this sort of very heavy cloud-based lingo and language that we use over here.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to ask one more question, but at this time, I also want to let everybody know that we're going to take questions from the audience. So this will be the time to enter a question into the app, the TiEcon app, if you've got it downloaded. So get those queued up while we answer this question. And as everything becomes software defined, what are the complications that are going to arise from a governance perspective, right? Particularly on the data side and the regulatory compliance side. We have to deal with things like HIPAA, with PCI, with data locality. Can you talk about how that's impacting each of you, and what are some of the considerations that we need to think about as either vendors or the audience maybe need to think about the consumers of these technologies?
This is probably the one area that presents a bit of a challenge, because now you're telling me my cloud has to stay within borders, and we all know clouds don't care about borders. So government, if you look at most of the clouds, including ourselves, we have dedicated business for the federal, for all these verticals, if you will, that have data sovereignty or legal things to where you have to have your data and the services located in a particular location. We have customers who demand that only US citizens who have accreditations can work on it. So when you start getting deeper into regulated industries, it becomes much harder and the time cycles become much longer to migrate to the cloud. It's doable, but there's a lot more challenges with the legality of it.
So we know the data is king, right? Company loses data, they get sued. Yahoo got sued a couple of weeks back for leaking credit card numbers. The data security is very, very important. And again, when it's your house, security is a little bit easier. You have firewalls and a bunch of other stuff. What we do is we provide FIPS compliant encryption to our customers along with a bunch of stuff. We provide role-based access control so nobody could get into the box unless they have the privileges. But where it gets really interesting is when the data also can kind of spill over to the cloud. That's where we ensure that everything that goes to the cloud is all encrypted, 256-bit encryption, and the keys never leave the data center. They, in fact, are fetched from a key management server. So if someone even steals a disk or a node from our system and runs away with it, you can get at the data. So security is very, very important to these enterprises. They lose data, there's someone who's going to lose a job, and there's someone who's going to sue that company. So security in this space is very important, and as the infrastructure becomes more flexible, so are the challenges that security brings, and vendors like us just have to kind of be up on our toes and provide the kind of security that our customers need.
So I think there are two problems here. One is easy to solve and one is very, very hard. The easy to solve problem is that we're a network service, so data just flies by us, and so we take no responsibility because we don't really know what's in the data. That's the easy part. The hard part is that as the data is flying by, from the endpoints, we can actually determine who's accessed the data. We can determine what data has been accessed. And so this is a lot of very privileged and useful information that lots of folks would want to get access to, and it's a really hard problem to solve, particularly as we are going outside North American and Western European geographies. So as we get to Asia Pacific, as we get to Africa, these are, because of the data privacy concerns and because of where people want to keep things in country, this is not an easy problem to solve, particularly because as we were discussing, the cloud doesn't really obey these kind of boundaries. So federation, technology, and all of that is something that we're looking at, but not an easy problem right now to solve.
Let me just add one thing to that, which is a very unique challenge that we've seen with two customers, one in Canada, one in Germany, which is they want to use what we call a walled garden internet. They say, we want to use the internet, but my data can never leave Germany. So how do you solve that challenge as a network operator when the internet was designed to route around issues and outages? How do you keep data in a country while still using a semi-public internet? That's a massive challenge for a lot of operators.
Great. Okay, so we have time for just a couple quick questions, and first one, Sanjay, I know you wanted to talk about this. A couple of questions around the acquisition of Uppal, and what does this mean for this whole kind of market space, your market space, and the software-defined anything market space? Is this a sign of something more to come?
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting. Just on Monday, you folks may have seen an announcement that Cisco purchased one of our competitors, which is Uppal. So this caused a lot of excitement because it just validated that there there is going to be a huge amount of growth in this space, otherwise this move would not have been made. But I think that if you take the perspective of the movement from physical to virtual, it's still primarily an on-premises kind of play. So it's, I would say, a half step towards what we've been talking about here, which is a full movement to the cloud. But I think that this is not going to be the last movement in this space. This is probably the first one because of the numbers that I mentioned, that if it's only 1% adoption now, in 3 years going to be 30%, and hopefully in 6 years or so going to be north of 80, 90%, then this is just the beginning of the movement of networking to the cloud.
Great. Okay. All right. So we'll really wrap it here with one final word from each of you. And we come a long way in this cloud journey over the past 5-10 years. Where do you see us being 5 years from now in this whole dimension of or spectrum of cloud and software-defined infrastructures? What's coming next? What's on the horizon? So we'll start with you, Mohit.
I think 5 years from now, I believe that customers shouldn't have to worry about the distinction between the infrastructure that they use, whether it's on-prem or whether it's the cloud. I think someone said here that customers only care about the applications they run. And I think what's going to happen is that they will basically inject their application and attach some description to that, or maybe an SLA, that hey, this is a production app and whatever data it produces, it shouldn't get lost, and by the way, I need full predictability. Every request that this application makes should be satisfied within 5 milliseconds. That's the kind of stuff that customers worry about. And the underlying infrastructure should just take care of it. So what I'm trying to say is that the private and public clouds will just kind of meld together, and there will be a software layer, a software-defined layer on top that will transparently take care of where it's best to run these applications. I think this distinction between private and public clouds and that sort of stuff is, in my mind, should go away.
I think in 5 years' time, we'll fully realize and go beyond the everything as a service. Today, you can do washing machine as a service, cooking as a service. I mean, Uber and Airbnb didn't exist 5 years ago. You're going to see things being offered as a service that none of us could have imagined, right, back in time, which inevitably on the enterprise means that you're going to have more people who are weaving services together versus developing them. So you're going to see a rise of a new class of engineers who orchestrate between services, who pull stuff together to solve business needs much, much faster than ever imagined, because you don't have to develop everything. You just piece 2, 3, 4 services together and you deliver your solution very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think for us in 5 years, right now we talk about users accessing applications through a network, but that definition of user is changing very rapidly. So, one of these devices or sensors in the home or sensors at work, all of these will be connected to what we believe is going to be a software-defined WAN. So no longer is it going to be your LTE, or you have to choose. Like right now, you got to say, okay, am I on LTE or Wi-Fi? And things sometimes behave differently. That choice and that distinction is going to go away for everything, not just for your phones and your networks at home, but also for each of these devices. Maybe it's your washing machine or whatever it is that connects to the network. There'll be no distinction between how it connects. I think that's going to be a fundamental change in the industry, but that move is already on.
Okay, great. And I'll close out with the IBM point of view. I think that certainly the opportunity exists for us to start layering on artificial intelligence, machine learning onto these types of technologies. As the data as things become software defined, and we can inspect the data and we can watch the data, we can start to do things like inspect open flow network traffic and start to do predictive optimization. We're already doing some of these things with the Spark, Apache Spark, and some of our spectrum computing capabilities of observing computing patterns and doing optimization of computational placement. I think this will just increase, and I think the opportunities to layer these on all of these technologies is really an exciting opportunity for the next 5 years. So with that, we'll close out the panel. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it, and we'll all be around afterwards for questions. Yeah.